The Australian Mines and Metals Association says it's concerned about a number of recent rulings by Fair Work Australia which impinge on the rights of employers. The group says it will raise $500,000 to create an IR Foundation fund to support small employers in such cases. Sky News business reporter Susan Wilson spoke to the association's chief executive Steve Knott and started by asking how common these rulings are becoming.
We're seeing a lot of judgments that are coming out that are surprising us and many in the employer community. We're seeing judgments where employers are being required to promote trade union membership. We're finding judgments where the employers have to abide by terms and conditions negotiated by somebody else. We're seeing judgments that are saying that union officials, union delegates in the workplace are subject to different codes of behaviour than other people in the workplace. And of course the JJ Richards case was a case where a minority of employees were able to take strike action against the wishes of a majority. And that was completely contrary to what we were led to believe when the IR legislation was drafted by the Labor government.
The Victorian government says it will support the push to overturn a federal court ruling on the case of Greg Barclay. Why do you think it's taking on this cause?
Well, they're doing it not just for themselves as a major employer in Victoria, but for employers throughout Australia. I think most fair-minded people would think it would be ridiculous that people that are acting in the role of a union delegate can be seen as a sort of protected species. If you're out there putting in the marketplace, and I'm not specifically on the Barclay case, something out to a group of employees that is manifestly untrue, then you'd expect to be subject to some disciplinary action, or indeed, in some cases, dismissal. So we're saying the Code of Conduct rules, and this is what the Victorian government are seeking to get reinforced through the High Court, it should apply equally to everyone, regardless of whether they're a union member and regardless of whether they're a union delegate.
ACTU's Jeff Lawrence has accused the AMMA of trying to reinstate work choices. Is that the case? Where do the comments come from?
Well, they're out of their spin doctor factory from about 4 years ago when they had the Work Choices campaign that was successful. Look, our industry didn't rely on work choices. We set wages and conditions well over $100,000 and have done for some 4 or 5 years now. So we have people in our offshore oil and gas industry earning $495,000 per annum. So I don't think anyone seriously takes the comments of the ACTU as valid when our employees are well paid, they're well looked after, and we certainly will not be looking to reduce their terms and conditions as the ACTU suggests.
So the IR Foundation Fund, is that essentially to support small employers that find themselves in this situation?
Well, there's a number of cases that have applied to a small enterprise, like the JJ Richards case, that left unchallenged would apply across the whole Australian economy. So the situation we were led to believe, and we've moved through a different system in the new IR laws where you can be compelled to bargain, and that is if you have what's called a majority support, 50% plus one. So we accepted that as part of the new rules, but the JJ Richards case says that you only need a minority of people to take strike action. Now, we have some workplaces where you'd have 3,000 people on site. If 12 people were allowed to take strike action, they wound up by a union campaign against the wishes of the majority of employees. It can bring a job to a standstill. So that's what our concern is.
But $500,000 is not very much, especially when you put it into context. Is this something that you're going to have to look at on a case-by-case basis?
Oh, look, the $500,000 is, if you look at that on its own, then it isn't very much. That gets eaten up very quickly in the High Court and Federal Court proceedings. And on that front, we're just disappointed that the government hasn't intervened in Fair Work Australia proceedings to nip some of these things in the bud and say, no, that's not what we intended. Instead, individual employer groups like Australian Mines and Metals Association, the Australian Industry Group, Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and so forth have had to challenge many of these judgments, and some of them will end up in the courts, and that gets expensive. We're a national employers group, we have lawyers in every state, so the $500,000 is just a top-up on top of our normal business activities because we see heightened activity in this area. So
is Fair Work Australia up to the job?
Well, Fair Work Australia, people get confused in the marketplace. It is an administrative body, and over the history of Fair Work Australia, they've often had challenges to their determinations in what some people refer to as the real courts, the Federal Court and the High Court. So some of the creative interpretations, we would call them that, or some might call them activist determinations. It's not unusual for those determinations to be challenged, but we're seeing an increasing number of those at the moment.
Is the current worker shortage putting the industrial relations debate out of balance?
Well, it is in some respects it is. People talk about unfair dismissal laws. We have employees in our sector basically interviewing employers because we do have a massive shortage, and the pipeline we have coming through of $133 billion in projects, we're going to have massive shortages. Notwithstanding the training of apprentices, a number of apprentices don't go through and complete their indentures and drop out. We've got skilled migration issues, and we welcome the government's decision on budget night in relation to enterprise migration agreements. There's a whole raft of issues there, but at the end of the day, because of the shortage, that it is applying price pressures. If you go to Perth at the moment and try and buy a keno or get something served at a restaurant, you'll find it's a bit challenging at times because they're short of staff. And where are they? They're all up in the Pilbara or offshore in the oil and gas industry making good money.
But with all these projects in the pipeline, the problem's only going to get worse. You've mentioned the government is doing something to address the issue. They've recognised the problem, but is it doing enough?
Well, the training initiatives are things that will take some time to come to market. So you're looking at a 4 to 5 year period. But unfortunately, we don't have that luxury of waiting, because if we don't proceed with some of these projects, eventually the money will go elsewhere. So we should be proud of our migration programs in the past, and we should welcome skilled migration to help us over this hump over the next 2 to 3 years. So the government could do more with skilled migration. The English language tests are too high a barrier. We've had projects like the Hydroelectric Commission down in Tasmania, the Snowy Mountains scheme, that were built on skilled migration. And we should be proud of bringing those people in and having them in work groups where they can work safely. But the English language tests are far too high and, quite frankly, would challenge some university entrants, I can assure you. So they need to lower the English speaking requirements and just do the right thing by Australia to allow us to maximise the opportunities that we're blessed with in the next few years.
That is Trading Day at the Close with James Dagger Nixon is next. Stay with us.